I'm good to go ahead and get started. I'm sure most of you guys are actually here because of Charlie, right? So you know him. It doesn't need much introduction. Lifelong philatelist, postal historian, award-winning author, all the stuff, and enjoys researching, restoring, writing, publishing, presenting. And in honor of today's opening day of baseball, I'd like to nominate Charlie for the MVP, Most Valuable Philatelist. This is a guy that
Whoa,
did you like that? Do you see what I did there? Right?
that's pretty good. You got to record. You
Yeah,
recording this? Because that was
yeah,
pretty good, Steve.
absolutely. No, but he helps guys. I see it on Facebook every single day from people that are there on their first day and people that are in the middle and people that are as advanced as they can be. Charlie's always there for everybody to, for whatever topic it might be. He's the guy, and people on Facebook know he's become a minor Facebook celebrity. Now he's got a little fan club. Last week, there were people putting stuff on there about how much they appreciated his help. So that's great feedback when you have total strangers, people you never met in person, never seen at a show or a club or anything like that, but you're out there helping them and inspiring them to do the things you love too, and sharing your knowledge of all this stuff. So without further ado, Charlie, we really appreciate you being here for this presentation.
Well, I appreciate those very kind words, Steve. You know, I do love the hobby. I love the research and search. I love all the things that we do, and I love the camaraderie. And I've had great mentors. I can say that, along the past, however many decades it's been. And, I think I'm in a continuous learning mode. I think as many of you around the table, I've learned a lot from each of you as I look around this group. And so, so I thank you. I thank all of you. And tonight I'll just share a little story. And, again, feel free to, ask me questions along the way or at the end. It's just one little story about a little cover that I found that took an amazing trip there and back again over about a 6-month period. And hopefully you'll get some useful information out of it. Maybe you'll believe the story that I'm going to tell and kind of the way I diagnosed this cover and the trip that it took. And I'm always looking for alternatives and opinions and feedback and insight. And there were a lot of people that contributed to this who I'll thank along the way. And while I'm saying that, again, Steve, thank you again. And to the Mid-Atlantic Federation Postal History Societies and all the societies for hosting these. I really appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to the future meetings. I'm going to start sharing, and I'll go to my first slide, and hopefully you can see that. And then we can kind of dive on in. So Steve, can you see the first slide?
Yeah, we can see it.
Great. Thank you, Ron. Excellent. So I like maps as well, not just postal history and stamps. And I like a little bit of everything here. And so I'm going to try to show you tonight and tell you a story from the United States to far India and back again. A 5-month journey of a Baptist missionary cover from 1856 to 57 that I found a couple of years ago in a lot of stampless transatlantic covers. And this one really stuck out to me. And the challenge when you see the cover, for me, as soon as I saw it, after I sat back in the chair because I couldn't believe what I was looking at, was to determine the rates and the routes. And then the story that unfolded from that was something I did not know, but until you start to do the research, it's amazing what you can find, not just in books and talking to your colleagues, but also searching the World Wide Web. And so let's move to the next slide. So here is a cover. I'm sure we all have seen covers that have many cancels on them. This one, in my experience, probably is one of the most busy covers that you will see. Like I said, I acquired it in the summer of 2018. It was in a mixed transatlantic postal history lot. It is a stamped envelope, although if you look there at the bottom right, you could see a few stamps are missing, and all that are left are a couple of 3-cent 1851s. It is a thin blue paper. It is resealed around the edges. There are no contents. And as we dive into this, you're going to see it's dated 1856 and 57. And the challenge when I looked at this cover with all of the cancels and the various rates and the various addresses that are there and the crossed outs and the manuscript markings, where do you begin? Can it be done? Can you decipher the journey that this little cover took? And I'm happy to say at the end of this, and hopefully when I walk you through it, the answer is yes. I'm going to show you a number of tools that I use to help along the way. A number of different resources that are available to all of us. And at the end of the day, I think we painted a really good story. There is a human interest story about this cover of who sent it and where it went and the family that would have received it but did not. And then the journey that it took from the US to Father India and then back again over that 5.5, 6 month period. And so again, I'm just keeping it up for a minute to look at the various orange, black, red, magenta markings, some stamps, not all of the stamps. There is some pencil marking on the back, of where the stamps were removed. We'll go into all of those details as we go through the talk. So the talk will be broken out into kind of these 6 sections. An overview of the covers, obverse and reverse. I'll then go into revealing the cancels and what tools you might use to actually do that, to be able to identify all of those, even the ones that are overlapped. Then we'll talk about following those cancels. Can we recreate the journey that this letter took from Ohio? I'll tell you that much. And it went all the way to Arakan in Father India. And then it came back again. Then we'll go into following all the rates. There were a number of different rates on there. And, there was the manuscript markings. There was also postage and lack of postage. We'll then conclude the journey. Fortunately, it was able to identify, I believe, the actual ships that this letter went on. And then I'll talk about a fanciful reconstruction, because where those stamps are missing, I'd like to be able to find what those stamps were that were on there to make up the rate. And we'll kind of show you what we think this cover looked like back in 1856. And so with that being said, and again, if, interrupt me along the way if you have any questions once we dive in, I'm happy to answer. Let's go with an overview of the obverse and reverse. So here is the cover front. And I'll tell you right off the bat that this black cancel, this circular date stamp right here at the right, which says Warren, Ohio. And as we go through this, it is dated August 20, I believe it's 28th or 22nd, is where the cover originated. And if you look at the address, and it was sent from the US, it went to Father India. And the address here is a Reverend Alfred B. Satterley. It says Baptist Mission in Ankiab, Arakan, which is the address here. It says Father India in Asia. So that's where it was sent from Warren, and it was going all the way to the Baptist Mission in Arakan. And we'll go into details of that location, where it is, how might you get there. The other thing to look at with this cover that has 20 some odd cancels, and there were a few cancels on the reverse, there's plenty of manuscript markings as well. You could see paid on the back, paid 90. There's a large 80 in magenta. You could even see a large numeral 2 here at the lower right. What you'll also see are a few more squiggles of the address being crossed out. And then you see in a different hand and a different pen, another address. And this was part of its return trip. That happens to say Boston. It came back to Boston. Didn't go back to Warren, Ohio, where it was mailed from. And then you'll see peppered throughout a number of double circle reds. You'll see this octagonal cancel. Some of you may know these just from looking at them, that some are from, Great Britain. Others are going to be from India, because that's where it was going to transit there. And then there are some that are really buried underneath, and some are very faint. So where do you begin to start to diagnose these cancels? But it did go from the US to Great Britain to India, through Egypt to Father India. And I'll really lay out the transit. Let's look at the reverse. So where is the postage paid? The postage paid would have been 90 cents. You could see somebody that had this cover before me knew what was here. They wrote 12 cents, 1851. And so there were, to make up this rate, some really nice, Scott number 17, 12-cent black, 1851 stamps. 7 of them are missing. And someone knew when this was removed, whenever it was removed, they actually were able to write the plate positions down of this block, if we think it was a block or a strip irregular, because you'll see a little pencil marking down here, 71, 72, 81, 82, 83, 84. So, and it's actually to 73. So there was a little bit of a person that removed them whenever they did knew what was there. But they left the 3 cent on there. This added up to make up the rate, which we'll find out is twice the 45-cent rate from United States to India via Southampton in Great Britain, which we'll go into. You could also see some additional cancels on the reverse as it was making its transit from Ohio all the way to farther India. But this is what the cover looks like. Here's the front, plenty of cancels and markings. Here's the reverse with postage that was missing. This is why it said paid on the back here on the front, because they put the postage on the back. They couldn't fit it on the front. And you have double the rate because this definitely had some contents to it. No doubt they're gone, but I would suggest very thick, multiple pages of letter that was written to the Reverend from whoever was writing that in Warren, Ohio. So where to begin? And I think, revealing the cancels. And I think many of you are probably aware of a tool that's been out on the World Wide Web in your browser free. I've probably been using it for easily over a decade, if not longer. And it's called Retro Reveal. And this is a really useful, free, in the open space, hosted by the University of Utah. And you go to retroreveal.org. And their mission is very simple. They want to facilitate collaborative discovery of hidden content in documents and manuscripts and music and artifacts. And boy, this works really well for the area that we study, stamps and/or covers or postal history. This free discovery tool allows you to upload your image, and it does all the processing, and it pushes out images where the color space has been changed. And here on this slide is a great example. At the top is just a scan that I took of the cover at high res and on my little Canon scanner. And on the bottom, after I hit the process button, what comes out is a cover that in at least one color space, and I put some of the details down there, but you don't have to get lost in some of the details. What's important is by changing the color spectrum in the color space, you can highlight or mask certain colors within the spectrum. And if you look at the cover below, you can see that this mutes the red cancels because they're kind of lost in the background down here. And what it highlights is the black ink. And so very useful to actually try to decode in the middle of these 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cancels, what's left behind. And you can clearly then read the address. You can clearly see, the markings, the manuscript markings in black and the circular date stamps. Even the 42 pops out, paid on back. So this simple tool, when you upload your image and hit process, will push out about 30 or 40 different images that all of the color spaces have changed. They look at different hues and saturation and values, and it allows you step by step to kind of decode what you have. You could very simply upload a stamp that has a very light cancel on it, and this would then really highlight the cancel, and you can kind of get a feel. So multiple uses if you're not familiar with Retro Reveal, but I think many folks by now are. Let's try a few other images. Here is another way by looking at other color spaces or channels. Again, push of a button, upload the cover, push the button, Retro Reveal will spit out a lot of images. Look at the lower left, how now the black cancels are kind of muted and the red and orange cancels are highlighted. And you can see them much clearer. And when you study these images and look at them, and these are just a few examples, you can look at 40, 50 different images. It allows you to kind of really read and see what you might not have seen in the original cover, which is here at the upper left. And so, this upper right color spectrum, they call it a kludge, this configuration. This configuration is what the first black and white televisions were. They utilized this particular color space of this configuration. So there's things that the human eye cannot see. This software allows you to do it. And it's free and it's in your browser and you could use it and upload an image. You can keep the images private. You don't have to make them public and you could see them. And then you can save those images that are processed to your computer and you have. It's like opening up Photoshop or any imaging software that you might have. And you can slide the bar, not just simply doing contrast and brightness, but you can change color spaces. And it's a really useful tool, whether you have one or two cancels or a faint cancel or something like the cover that I'm showing you.
Charlie, can I ask you a question?
Of course you can, sure.
My question, when I do this, it limits the size of the thing I could study. I can't do a whole cover. Is there something wrong with the way I'm doing it, or is just?
So I think you don't need to take a real high res. If you take a standard like this cover and you have it at 300 DPI and the file is probably only a few megabytes, because I think it caps it at 6.5 megs. So if you just take
that's the problem I run into.
Yeah. So if you just take a cover like this, or you can take a snippet of your cover, if that's where the cancels are, a manuscript, and just upload that small piece, LeBron, and then let it process it, and then you will get results. Absolutely. Yes.
Well, if you do a snippet, you can get a better picture of what you have.
That's correct. And I've done that. I
like the snippet part of it because a lot of the things that are very light, and this is very good.
Yeah. And so in this case, you're right. If, the original was a 1200 DPI, that was it too large of a file. So I did reduce it and it then allowed me to do the whole cover. So you just don't need that high res for this. You just want to be able to unmask the cancel. So try that, LeBron. That would work for you. Absolutely. I have done that.
Well, I'm looking at there's one image here that is not coming through. I think it's a Bombay page or something.
That's exactly right. You got it right. That's the boxed Bombay right here, LeBron. You got it. Correct.
Well, I've seen a few covers, but anyway, what I'm saying is that if you would put that in a higher resolution, and go to retro reveal, you can get a good picture of it. Is that right? That's my thought on it.
Yes, you can. That's right. And so you'll see that, and I've got other examples that are on cover of the Bombay. Here, it's amazingly light, but you're able to see those when you change the color space. And I'm just showing you 3 examples. I looked at 60 different images, and I looked at all of those, and all of the various cancels I'm going to show you were illuminated depending on the color space that I chose. So yeah, this is highlighting only a few, but there are many more. So now look, how did you know, LeBron? Here's your Bombay, right? I'm just showing you what the Bombay looks like. So can we follow the breadcrumbs? Can we follow the trail by using what I just showed you in retro reveal to identify all of the individual cancels? And before I show you all the cancels, I want to show you the cover front again. Here it is. There's easily 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14 some odd cancels, 13 or so are hand stamps on the front, and there's 3 or 4 on the back. So in words, I will show you the journey that I put together. Then I will show you the cancels isolated. So by following the cancels and using retro reveal, and then regular light, I didn't have to use retro reveal for everything. Some of those cancels, as you saw under regular illumination, you can decode. The Warren, Ohio cancel, the black at the right, is you can read it. The New York, January 28th, the last one, 11, you can read that. It's the ones in the middle where they were overlapped, which took a bit of extra effort. So let's follow the cancels. The cover entered the mails in Warren, Ohio, number 1, August 22nd in 1856. The next stop was the New York 7 British packet, August 26th paid. Took about 4 days to get from Ohio to New York City.
Is that the rate though, Charlie? I think you made that. Is that that New York 7?
Yeah,
that's not a rate that on a British mail.
Yeah, that's not the rate. It's not the rate, and that's right here. And but so
it's not a partial rate.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's a partial rate, and there's the 7 above. So that is partial. That's not full payment. So you see the 7 above, right there.
I think I'm wondering if it's different than 7.
And that's great, and it could be. But that's how I'm reading that little numeral. If I went back, you can see it right there. Looks like a 7. And I'll go back and look in Winter's cancels
Yeah,
and just
because
double check that.
the rates are 521, basically going to see either a 5 or 21 or a
Yes.
19.
Yeah, so how do you interpret? So we should talk about that when we go through this, because that to me looks like a 7 and matches the cancel 7, which would be very odd, LeBron, right? That's odd.
It's a German rate.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Anyway, but
No,
I don't mean to
we'll go
interrupt.
through it. We'll go through it. And then when I add up the rates, I think we know what the rates should be. And we know
90
the
cents
transit
rate.
it took. Yeah, because it didn't leave New York. This actually left out of Boston, which we'll get to. So the next cancel is after it leaves, at least the August 26th, New York City, is we see the London transit, which we have a paid XX, can't read it, 8 September 8:56. You then see an India paid, sorry if my puppy is barking, red boxed India paid hand stamp at Southampton. You can see that was buried underneath 3 different cancels. The next rectangular cancel is the Bombay 56 October. So now we're in India, we're transiting India. Rail, you then have an October 56 Calcutta. I'll show you all of these, 1856 GPO transit. And then we finally get the receiver when it arrives in Ankia, November 1st. So it finally made it to its destination after leaving Warren, Ohio, August 22nd. It made it to Ankia by November 1st, 1856. So that was some trip to get halfway around the planet. But then when I started looking at this cover, and of course I saw that New York 28, I didn't realize that it had taken the trip back. But then you see it took a trip back. Because then you have a November 14th, it looks like, Calcutta GPO. You then have another London transit, January 11th, 1857. You have a Southampton transit the 12th. And then finally, it's back in the United States on January 28th, American packet in January. So it very apparent after I did the retro reveal and then looking at all of these cancels that this left Warren, went all the way to Ankia, and then for whatever reason, it took a trip back. Was the recipient not home? Could they not find him at the missionary? So we'll get to that story as well. But this cover took a very long trip and came back. Somebody paid 90 cents to get it there and back, and it was never actually read. So now let's look at those cancels and look and see what they look like by using, just in normal color space. So here's the trail that this cover took, at least to the best of my decoding. I believe this is the trip that it took. Here's the Warren, Ohio, CDS, August 22nd, 56. It went to New York City. And again, LeBron, I love, this looks like a 7. I mean, I don't know.
It does look like a 7. I can't,
I'll share.
I can't argue that.
Yeah, it looks like a 7. So either it was misstruck, they misinterpreted the rate, but that's what it looks like. So
what is it? What's it right after? It looks like a B. Does that be Bremen?
So I think, Bremen, British, Bremen. This went to Boston, and this went on the
part.
Yeah, it went on the Cunard Line steamer Canada out of Boston.
It's weird.
Yeah, it is. It is weird. Thank you. I'm glad you said that. So there's the red CDS that was struck in New York. It clearly went overland and it made it to Boston. It went on the Cunard Line steamer Canada. And then you have a London transit. It's this partial orange that's here. And it is absolutely September 8/8/56, because you can decode the date 56 there. You also have the 1D British Colonial Credit. That's a very clear 1D British Colonial Credit.
Yeah, but that's when it comes back. It gets that.
That's right. So it
doesn't get on the way out.
Does not. It gets it when it comes back. And this should be on the slide when I show you coming back. But from London, we know it went overland to Southampton because it's now going to get on a P&O steamer to Alexandria, overland, Suez, Egypt, Red Sea, Arabian Sea to Bombay, India. I'll show you a map, but that's how it went. And I'll show you a map. And then the next cancel it receives when it gets to Bombay is this very typical red rectangular Bombay. And I've just shown a receiver down here in black. This one is in red, Bombay 56 October transit. So I think A couple of you would recognize that. That's what it looks like here. Here's an example from another cover. From Bombay, it went overland via rail, following the rail down the tip and up. Here's a Calcutta, and this is what it would look like. Here's an example from another cover with GPO underneath, the Calcutta Transit. You can see the beginning of an O, and it's 1856. And then finally it reaches the destination where the addressee was supposed to be. Here is a very faint double circle red Ankiab, November 1st, 1856 PO receiver. Here is from another cover I was able to locate. This is what the cancel would look like, absolutely the receiver. And it made it to Ankiab. Here's a little map that I just pulled, and I'll show you a larger map of where Ankiab is, in modern day, Sitwe or Myanmar, right? This is in Burma. And it arrived November 1st, 1856. And it was again addressed to the Reverend Alfred B. Satterley at the American Baptist Missionary in Ankiab, Father India, Asia, which is modern day Burma. So that's where it went from using retro reveal and looking at all these cancels. This seems to be the transit that it took to get there over the few months that it took. Let's look at the next slide, which shows you, I think, and I like maps, so I grabbed from the Rumsey collection, which is again free and available online. David Rumsey map collection is a phenomenal collection of just what appears to be tens of thousands of maps from covering a broad array. You can get some really phenomenal maps that you can use, and you just have to give the reference. And here's just one of them. So this is the transit. There's Warren, Ohio at the left, right on the border with Pennsylvania. It went overland by rail. That's probably the way it went. That was the rail of the day to New York City. After it got to Philly, went up Jersey, New York. There's the purple dot, New York. Overland through Connecticut up to Mass, to then Boston. It took the Cunard Line steamer Canada, based on the date and doing the research, that it went by the Canada. And this is working with I'll give credit at the end. This is working with Dwayne Littauer and Dick Winter to kind of look at this cover and figure out how we think it went from doing the research. To Boston to Liverpool. And you see I use black when I'm on land, and of course I had to change the ink to blue when it went on the water. But so that's the first part of the journey to get it from Warren, at least on a sailing vessel. So now the transit from London to Southampton to Alexandria to India to Ankiab. We know from the cancels that it did, get to Liverpool. It definitely went overland and landed at Southampton, right? It then went on the P&O, which is Peninsular and Oriental Steam, which we know did this transit hugging the coast and through the Straits and through the Mediterranean. Still have not identified that P&O steamer. I don't know that we ever will, but I do not know that.
Well, you can check with the guy in England can tell you that Trabert or Tabert.
Yes.
He'll tell you.
Yep, perfect. That's going to be very helpful. Then we know it landed and went to Alexandria. It went overland. There was no Suez Canal, so we know it went overland Suez. And then we know it got on another vessel through the Arabian Sea to Bombay. And then that's from the cancel. Then we know it railed around Calcutta. And then there's your green dot, which is the final destination in Ankiab. So this kind of puts that first part of the journey together from August to November, based upon all of the cancels and transits that I was able to share with you that were on the cover. And that's just the first part of the story. We would be done if that was the first part, if there was not anything else on this cover. But as we'll find out, the recipient was not there. So at the time, I'd like to pull another map. Hindustan or British India during this period is what it was referred to, right? 1856. Here's that overland trip, forwarded to Calcutta, then back to Boston. Why was the letter returned to the United States? And so in my research, and there's quite a bit of information online, and the Baptist mission and missionary, has an amazing volume of information that has been digitized and is available online. And the fact that this went to this reverend, we knew who he was, we knew it was an American Baptist missionary, after a couple of searches and, Boolean and otherwise, and ors and with and without quotes, you could pull up quite a bit of information about the Reverend. And as it turned out, when the letter arrived in November of 1856, the Reverend had already passed from cholera. So he was not there. He was not in country. He had passed 4 months earlier in July of 1856, and his family, who were in at least Warren, Ohio, would not have known that. And they were writing a letter, and they wanted to find out, how they were doing, the wife and the Reverend. And so he had died earlier in July when he took a trip to Calcutta with his wife, Sally, and their newborn daughter, Bella. All of this we were able to decode from the research looking online. And I'll tell you a little bit about the story. This is why the cover made the trip back, but there's more to it. Let's talk about the trip coming back, and then I'll give you the human interest story of it. So we know that it got to Arakan. We know that it was there. But when we look at the front of the cover, and I'll show that to you, the addresses were crossed out. There was a large manuscript too, and it was forwarded to Calcutta because they knew in Arakan he had gone to Calcutta. So it would appear that the American missionary in Arakan did not know that he passed in Calcutta, but they knew he was there, so they forwarded the letter there. But then in Calcutta, when it arrived, he was not alive, and we'll find that his wife was no longer there either. So here is the 1856 at upper left. It departed Calcutta. From India, went to Liverpool to London, because now we see a January 11th, 1857 D paid octagonal, right? Tombstone cancel, they call it. Then it went to Southampton. Buried under these 3 cancels is this cancel. Here's an example of this Southampton transit that is buried underneath these 3. And it is DD 12 January 1857. It is the Southampton transit, and it then got back to New York. So here's the journey from the 12th to the 28th. And we know the ship that went on as well. When it arrived in New York City in the harbor, American packet, 1857, 42 cents. You're right, LeBron, the 1D would have been struck earlier on the way back. But then when it got to New York, there was already a return address that had been put on, it would appear in Calcutta, to get it back to the BM rooms. This is the Baptist Missionary Rooms at number 33 Somerset Street in Boston. That's the Baptist Missionary. I was able to find online an old photograph from 1880 here at the left. Here's the First Baptist Church in the background. This is 12 Somerset Street. And 30, this address, this little address door front right here in the foreground right, is where this letter would have come back to. That's 30 Somerset Street there in Boston on the Hill. So this cover left Warren, made its transit, was not home, the recipient wasn't even Calcutta. They sent it back to the US to the Baptist Mission. And that kind of decodes all of those cancels that were on the cover by using retro reveal, a number of references, Dick Winters, for example, book, and a number of other references, Tabert, I'll reference them at the end. I think I was able to put this journey together of all of these cancels and get it back to Boston. So let's tell you a little bit about the Satterleys and the Baptist Mission, because there was a human person behind this letter. And it kind of makes sense when you do the investigation as to, one, who the Reverend was, where he was born, which was in Wyoming County, New York. He's a graduate of Brown University and went to the Baptist Theological Seminary. So an educated man, no doubt. And he married a Sally Fuller, who was born in New York as well. And they were married in 1854. Where were they married? In Warren, Ohio. So this is where her family was from. My belief is the contents of the letter were her family writing to check in on her since they left the U.S. And they ended up, in that part of the world in Arakan. And so that's where the letter was written from. They were married there in Warren. He was inspired by Judson. He enlisted in the missionaries and he went to Burma with his wife. They sailed in October of 55 from Boston to Calcutta. So he was He was in Boston at the Baptist Missionaries, which is why the cover, it makes sense, came back there. In June of 55, his daughter, Bella, was born, who was named after Bella Blakesley, the maternal grandfather. He was, and that was in Arakan. He had died, as I mentioned earlier, of cholera while he was on a trip to Calcutta. This is all documented in the American Baptist Missionary Union, the reference that I have at the bottom of the page. This whole story of his life and what he did is documented. And so let's go back. The letter was mailed from Warren, Ohio, on August 22nd, 56. Right? They would not be in communication. They would not have known that he had passed a month earlier while he was taking his trip to Calcutta with his wife and his newborn daughter. What I did find out, that she remained with her daughter, and on August 27th, 1856, she was enfeebled and not well. She sailed back to Boston with her newborn daughter. The letter already had arrived and their paths crossed in transit. The P&O steamer and others were coming to India with the letter, and she was heading back. And what we did find out, and this is documented, is that during her trip back on November 4th, she died and was buried at sea. And that's documented. And the captain, Captain Marcus Hall, was left to take care of their child, Bella. And, we say that sea captains take a lot of responsibility, and he didn't just have to, when he landed at port, deliver the mail as his first duty. He had to deliver the young child, Bella, and deliver her back when he landed at port in Boston at the Baptist Missionary. And so we know that he did that. That is documented. And he delivered her to Sally and Ira Fuller in Boston. And by 58, you can see the rest of the story. She survived being born in Arakan, traveling to Calcutta, her father dying in country, her mother dying at sea, and she survived. The journey at sea in the captain's hands was delivered, and then she was adopted later on, changed her name to Emily Adia, and she went on to have a long life and many children, and here we go, and there's a lot more to the story. But all of this decoded from simply this letter with the recipient and all of what we were able to decode from the trip. So I just wanted to throw that in of, you never know what you're going to find when you're doing a little research on what you think is a simple cover. You find out the people behind the cover. So now we want to talk a little about the rates and the markings and, maybe the mismarkings, with LeBron. Why would that have a 7? We'd have to research that. But
what did Dick Winter say or
Dwayne? Yeah, so Dwayne, I had to get back to because I think we've got to revisit that 7. And I think that was one of those items we kind of left out there. LeBron.
Because you think, it's got to be an even number because it's double.
It's got to be an even, right? It's got to be an even number. And this one, it's not. So let's look at the front again. I'm showing you the cover front. I just like to pepper the cover to give you a reminder of what we're looking at. Here are all the cancels. Here's the paid India, Warren, New York return. Here's the Calcutta, the Arakan. Here's the Bombay, right? Here's the address of the Reverend, the original. Here is that 2, large manuscript 2, where you see the address was crossed out, and you'll see Calcutta in very light type down here. That was crossed out because in Calcutta, they knew to send it back to Boston. That's where they wrote that return address. You also see paid 90, paid on the back, magenta 80, and paid 90. So a lot of markings. Now let's talk about can we decode the markings as well from the what was paid. And so again, the cover was addressed to the Reverend. Via Southampton was at lower left. You have this paid 90 at the right. You have a magenta 80. It went to our Ankial. He wasn't there. They knew he went to Calcutta. So they crossed out Asia at the bottom and they wrote in Calcutta, and they added the large brown 2, which was the rate to get it from Ankial. That was the forwarding fee to get it from Ankial to Calcutta. When it got to Calcutta, he had passed. He wasn't in country. He was, and the wife wasn't in country. So they knew at the missionary there to readdress it back to the Baptist missionary. And so here's sort of a summary of what they did when they crossed out Ankial, crossed out Calcutta. They wrote in the BM rooms number 33 Somerset to get it back. And that just now covers all of the manuscript markings. So with all of that, the cancels, the manuscript markings, what we believe was the likely transit that it took, which I showed you. Here is a summary of what I think, again, working with my friendly neighborhood mentors are Dwayne and Dick, this is kind of what we've come up with, that, the front of the envelope denotes 90 cents was paid 90. It's twice the rate. This clearly was, thicker than your normal letter. I have no doubt it had a multiple page letter in it. And it had to pay twice the rate, which was 45 cents to get from the US to Father India via Southampton. We know from the reverse that this was paid up front. The family paid the 90 cents to get it from A to B. They paid, and it was paid by the clerk in Warren by putting stamps on. A pair of 3-cent 1851s, which was the 6 cent, and then 7 12-cent 1851 blacks. That made 84 cents plus 6. There's your 90. From New York City, the letter was sent to Boston. It went on a Cunard Line steamer Canada to Liverpool. We know from the Liverpool receiving mark that it had a sail from Boston on the 27th of August because it arrived in Liverpool on the 7th of September. And we know the ship from looking at Lloyd's and other references, we know the ship that it left Boston on. From Liverpool, overland to London, then Southampton. From Southampton, it went on a P&O steamer to Alexandria, Egypt, overland Suez, then Red and Arabian to India. The Magenta 80 was written at the top would be an 80-cent credit to Britain for the letter carried by a British packet. That gets us there. Now we're coming back. The black 42 cent, which we saw, very bold, is the postage due in the US for a double rate open mail letter that was sent back by the American packet. We think from the dates that it was the Havre line Arago. We should all know the name Arago, a friend of Smithson, Smithson, Arago. I think when we started that online website for the National Postal Museum, we called it arago.edu. You should be familiar with that. When we did that in 06, that departed Southampton January 15th, 1857, and it arrived in New York City on the date that we have on the front of that cover. This was a very expensive trip, if we think about it, for a letter that was never opened or read, or at least if it was, it was put back in and it was sealed and it was sent back to Boston. This would be equivalent to $1.32, give or take postage that we think is there, to about $40, at least in 2019. It's probably in 2022, I should update that, 40 something dollars.
Charlie, also the postage was $1.80.
Yeah, correct. You are correct. $1.80, LeBron. Yes, thank you. I will update that. So again, we're talking a pretty significant amount of money, but you're writing to your daughter and your son-in-law to see how they're doing. They've been gone for a couple of years, and you'd like to know how they're doing. So I won't spend a lot of time, but I like ships. I like the Atlantic. I like what they're traveling. I like the details, steam, sailing vessel, all of that. So if we could figure out the ship it took, I like to figure that out as well. And, here is an image of what we believe it sailed on when it left. This is just, the Cunard Line steamer Canada. It fits with the dates. Here is just an ad, of what the Atlantic Mail Service looked like and the contract that was established in 47. This traveled in 56, many years after this was well established. And the America, the Niagara, the Europa, and the Canada were built. You will see that you could travel in some pretty good luxury. If you wanted to go first cabin for $120, even second was $70. If you look at this ad at the bottom, they had, an experienced surgeon on board. No doubt, letters and newspapers passed through the post office were loaded, and these are pretty sturdy. And these were, they really had these routes down. This was wooden hulled sidewheel steamer, out of Greenock. And we know that Glasgow yard very well. They produced some high quality vessels. This had a pretty good history, from when it was launched in 48. And, by the time it came to 65, its final voyage, that was Liverpool, Boston. And then it operated as a sailing ship on the Mississippi before it was scrapped in 83. So a long life for this vessel. And our letter, we know, went on that. as it made its trip over. What about coming back? The Arago is really, I think, from the research was what it came back on. Another, wooden hull brig rig side steamer 55 in New York, by that navigation. It was named for, as I mentioned earlier, Arago. It was operated under contract for the U.S. government as a transatlantic. And so it did a little bit of everything: passengers, cargo, mail, specie. Its home port was New York, but it did that run there: Southampton, Liverpool, Le Havre. The P&Os will take a little bit more work, but we'll get there. And just to end it out with the Arago, it was chartered as, for an Army transport during the Civil War there by the Department of War. So again, it had a pretty good life, at least for the decade and change that it ran. Again, we think that that's the vessel that it came back on that letter. So how do we conclude the journey? If we think we've used a number of tools, and I'll reference them at the end. We looked at the cover, we looked at retro reveal. We then tried to extract all of the rates and routes and cancels using different references. And I mentioned a few, I can mention more, even online tools. We were able to kind of decode the journey there and back. We were able to decode a bit of the human interest. I also want to fold some of the stamps into this story because we're missing a very important piece of the puzzle, which is not on the reverse of this cover when I received it. And so I began this journey in 18 and 19 to try to see if I could figure out and reconstruct it, right? And so I'm going to show you that in a minute. But what can we conclude from all of those things that I just showed you? From this journey, this diagnostic, if you will, of looking at this cover, is that there was an 1856 cover that had 20 plus cancels and manuscript markings. My task when I saw this, and I really set out and I dove in, was to determine the journey and learn a lot along the way. That this letter took from Ohio to the Far East India and then back again over this 5-month period. When I first looked at this and I, just trying to dive into this postal history piece of it and, looking at routes and rates and all of that, it seemed difficult. But what I found out, even looking at the overlapping and multicolored cancels and faint, and blurred hand stamps and even multiple rates and missing postage stamps, was that you could do it. Most covers are not this busy. Some only have a few cancels, even those that are faint. You should be able to decipher it by using what? I, used a lot of philatelic references in my home library as well as online. There's so many references now that are available electronically that are in the public domain. Your library, of course, has them. Other areas have them too, even within your club, the society. I can put a plug out for, the Smithsonian National Postal Museums, the American Philatelic Society Research Library. A lot of resources out there. If you don't have it, they'll send it to you. They'll make copies of it for you. For a couple of pennies, you can get pages. So I just mentioned a few: Winter, Tabert, Ashbrook. There are many others. Online databases and philatelic auction catalogs. Siegel's Power Search and others, and a number of you online here are invaluable resources. I mentioned a few: the digital manipulation software, Photoshop and Retro Reveal. These are out there. There are other, no-cost tools that allow you to manipulate stamps and covers and images and highlight what the human eye can't see. And then finally, colleagues. I've been fortunate in the past, however many years, to run into a lot of great individuals that have helped and mentored and folded me in, and stamps and postal history and other farm mails, just like Dwayne and Dick and Alan and others have been really instrumental in helping. And I was saying at the beginning of this, if you call or email an individual with the question and send a scan or mail them an issue, they will get back to you. And most folks are really happy to share what they know and try to help you put it together. For me, persistence paid off. I think I shared the most plausible route that this cover took there and back over that 5-month period. What I want to end with is, to my surprise, I showed you that there was a block missing, and it was in May of 19, and I've since tried to look for one other. I was able to locate, in maybe it was 19, maybe it was that summer, I was able to locate the block that was missing on the back of this cover. And I want to show it to you what we think it should look like. And it definitely came off this cover. So here's the front as it exists today. I've done nothing to it. It sits, it's nice, it's sealed, it's It's with this presentation and a write-up, because I've been asked to kind of write this up into an article if I could. But there's the front. Here's the back. It exists like this today. It was missing 7/12 cent, number 17. Was it singles? Was it a strip? Was it a large irregular block? I don't know, but looking, you can see the shadow of the footprint of where that block should be. And I knew I'd have to look for these blocks of number 17 are not very common. And that's why I mentioned Jim Allen before, because, you know, he won what? Champion of Champions, single frame on this stamp, and he knows it well. Cover, on cover, off cover. So I asked him, might you have it? Have you seen it? Do you know of this multiple? He searched high and low. He couldn't recall it, didn't know of it. But, you know, definitely if you search long and hard enough, and you know, I plate the 3 cent issues. So when I see these numbers here, 71, 72, 73, 81, 82, 83, 84 are, you know, somebody knew more, probably more recently than 100 years ago, removed what was probably a very large block from this cover, which they might have considered tattered and torn, to maybe put that on the open market. Clearly. And they knew what the positions were because they wrote the positions down on the actual pane. And so guess what? If you look long and hard enough, there's what the block looks like. I found this block of 6 that summer in an online for sale. There it is. It absolutely matches. I was able to plate it. There's the left margin. Here are the same 7-bar circulars. Here is the continuation of the red Calcutta double circle. Here is the other GPO red. You can see where this was folded over, that the block itself irregular has that triangle impression into the block. Absolutely, this is the block that fits there. And that's what it would have looked like then, other than I don't think I'll ever find a single that fits in that space that's missing. That would be an interesting. So, you know, anybody has a 12 cent, you know, number 17 out there that they think has a red New York cancel. There's YOR, that is New York. And that has a partial red little 1856 or 57 here and has a black looking can. That's the stamp that would be there. But that's what it would have looked like. And my search is still continuing for that single. And I'm working on getting that block my way, everybody, so it can be reunited with the cover. But that's what it would have looked like on the back. And I'm going to end there and open it up for questions because you've been very patient. I have to thank really Dwayne. I've listed a lot of other folks and names, people that have helped. Anything that I missed, my responsibility. And that's why I share this, because I think we've added another twist to the story, LeBron, when you called out that why is that a 7 integral in that red cancel when we still haven't answered everything. But I hope, and I'll stop sharing this in a minute, that what I've shown you when I go back to the transit, and I want to do that real quick, when I go back to how it got there, I think this Ohio, New York, Boston, London, Southampton, Alexandria, Arabia, Bombay, India, Calcutta, all the way on up is absolutely how it got there. These cancels tell that story. And I think coming back, that it left Calcutta, went to London, Southampton, got on that ship, went to New York, and then ended up overland, and it arrived in Boston here at this little doorstep with the baby Bella to be united with the family. So hopefully I've convinced you of that. And I'm opening up for questions. So thank you everybody for listening. I really appreciate it.
Let me ask you a question again.
Please.
How do you know that it went via the Suez versus going around the Horn?
That is the current best guess from the date leaving Southampton, that it most likely went on a P&O to get to Bombay because of the time frame, LeBron.
That's what that would be the explanation. I don't know what the time frame was.
Yeah.
But I know they would go both routes.
They absolutely would go both routes. That is correct. But
But
talking
you
with
can,
Dwayne, talking with Dwayne at least to start leaving Southampton when it left from that date to get to Bombay by October. Most likely it would have been a P&O. That's at least the best guess at this point.
well, what you could do if you'd, I can't pronounce Tabor's name, Tabard, but if you go to a John Barwas, because he's a buddy with him.
Yes.
And
Yes.
He wouldn't respond to me, but responds to John.
Yes.
So you could probably get the routing and the ship and the whole schmear from him.
Absolutely. I agree. And that's kind of, you're giving me, and I've been taking mental notes. There are still some gaps that I would love to complete
Well,
to
at least
be
you
able
find out
to
the
know.
ships.
Yeah,
You might get the right route in the ships, whether it's the right route or not.
absolutely. So yeah, no, great. And I'm still puzzled over that 7 in the, that what we think is not Bremen packet, but it can't be. I mean, British packet, because we know it went and it left, and it went in on the Canada up to Boston and Liverpool. So
Can you send me a scan of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
I'll try my Retroville to see if I can see anything on it.
Yeah, I will absolutely send that to you. Thank you. I appreciate the feedback and input. Hopefully I've convinced you of the story overall in this. There's definitely a couple opportunities, I think, to improve upon some of those transits, but at least
I'd go back to Dwayne too and ask him, was there ever a 7 put on it? Was there a reason 7 would be on it on a deal like that? Or might just be a mistake they made?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So that is absolutely one of the things that I kind of came to in my deduction was, did they just misstrike it? They knew it wasn't leaving New York on that next ship, that it was destined to go out of Boston. That was the next. So it is possible that they just misstruck it. That's true. Sure.
Well, Kennard came out of Boston.
That's exactly right. Correct.
So that's why, anything out to get in New York, it was started south of New York or west of New York.
That's correct. So thank you for that. Any other thoughts, comments? I'm totally crazy. Well, one, I'm a little crazy. So Wayne, please, what?
Yeah, that 7 mark is shown on page 10 of Dick Winter's volume 1, Understanding Transatlantic Mail. It's shown there on page 10.
Yes.
It's probably just was misrouted initially. I don't think unless you can prove that it went by Bremen mail. I think it was just stamped incorrectly.
What is it, a BRE? That's what it would be in the cancel.
BREM PK.
But I couldn't see. That's why I wanted to get the cover to see what it says.
Yeah, it looks like it's that marking that's on page 10 there.
Yeah, so I'll send you that scan and I'll let you reveal as well. And if you see something different there, because that looks like a 7 for all intents and purposes, right?
Well, it looks like a 7 to me too.
Yeah,
but it shouldn't be. It's a mistake somehow. It has to be an even number.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so that's what's really on. Yeah,
it's a credit. It's what it is. It's a 7-cent credit.
But it's just two times something, because all the credits are going to be in multiples too.
Yeah.
It's just probably misrated initially.
Yeah.
Oh,
so thank you for that too. And I'm going to go back and I've got notes and I'm going to do that. I think George is saying agreed and beyond belief that the number 17 surfaced and that no one cut it up. I agree, George. Amazing that, no one cut that up, but it exists.
Do you have that block? Did you acquire that block?
It's coming to me, my friend. It's coming my way. I'd like to get it reunited. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I think it was an irregular block of 7. And I think the individual that removed it didn't like the way it looked, and they made it a block of 7. There's no doubt. I think it was clearly a block of 7 because the plating was written 3/4. So I think it was. Yeah, I think it was.
One of the great covers of Philately is missing a stamp. In fact, a number of them are, but I know the one, I forget the name, the Council Clep or whatever it is, the one with the 5 centers on it.
Yeah, and it's missing, absolutely. And this one is missing the whole block.
Certainly, yeah. You have created an item that has a substantial value.
That's correct. Yes.
Can I segue on that there?
Sure, please go ahead.
So you found this in a lot, you said. I have no idea what you paid for it, but what is the difference between the way you have it now, obviously a hugely interesting cover, and if it would have that block or those 7 on there, like what's some kind of value? Is this a hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands?
It would be a tremendous. Yeah, LeBlanc could speak to that. You can give an estimate of what if we reunite the block, even without the other single on this cover. Yeah,
it'd be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000.
That's exactly.
Wow. Incredible. So now one
And
other,
if two crazies, it could bring more than that. It depends on,
yeah.
like if Jim Allen was still collected at 12 centers and saw the cover, he'd have to have it.
Well, you
If they
know,
were
I
ever
talked
took-
to Jim when I found it, LeBron, and he saw
Well,
it and he said, "Boy, it would be nice, Charlie, if one day you find the block, because that would be a great piece." I said, "I know, I know." Yeah.
So just one rather quick question, because I'm kind
Sure.
of new at some of this stuff. I have seen stamps reattached to covers. How much does that change the value, or would anybody, would you be open about that and say, hey, this has been reattached? How does that affect that value?
Not at all.
Oh, no kidding.
I mean,
Okay.
what basically,
Good to know.
because you end up getting a cert on it.
That's right.
I know there was a famous cover in one of the ladies had the pictorial cancels, the pictorial covers,
Mhm.
and someone, it was missing a 30-cent stamp, and someone noticed that she had the 30-cent stamp as a single, and they bought the cover for virtually nothing, or gotten a lot, and then bought the stamp, and then they had a $30,000 item.
Wow, excellent. Okay, that's cool to know.
Yeah, right. Because you realize, right? I just showed you what the block looks like, and it's unequivocal
Sure.
that originated on this
Yeah.
cover, period.
Yeah.
So you could have it expertly restored and put back on, submit it, it would get a clean cert. And now you've put you put it back together, right? Of how it should have been and what it would look like. Yes.
So I can only imagine the exuberance that you felt when you found that block of 6. I can't begin to imagine if you found that other single. That would be.
But you live so long.
I maybe Steve I want everybody here on the line. You know what it looks like. I mean, I wish you well in your search. That would be great.
Sure.
Yeah. Didn't you feel the 4.2 seismograph when I fell off the chair when I found the block? I mean,
That's got to be incredible.
it was really funny because I was looking for quite some time, and you stumble across things when you look. So any other questions, thoughts, corrections, comments? I mean, any of that. I'm open. I'd love to learn from all of you on what you think of the story and kind of filling in some of the gaps.
No, this is completely outside of my area. In fact, when I got the pop-up that this meeting is occurring, I tried to Google some things, and I'm like, I have no idea what this is going to be about, but this is absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. I mean, I'm very happy to learn about the retro reveal. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're very welcome. Yeah, that is an invaluable tool that you just.
I used it twice today.
Yeah, I know you did.
I wrote 2 articles using it.
Yep. And now I use that now. I'm writing something for the Chronicle, and I've got a flaw on a 3-cent 1851, and it's maybe buried behind a little bit of a cancel, and I'm not sure what I'm looking at. I simply uploaded it into Retro Reveal, and you very cleanly get rid of all of the din, the noise, and you just highlight the feature that you want to look at. And it's really kind of amazing that you're able to do that. Between all colors, red cancels, green cancels, blue cancels, orange, it doesn't matter. Black as well. You saw how it really unmasked, and it allows you to look at it. And it's a really powerful tool. And so I'm glad, at least from that, you've got that little nugget out of this, which is great. So Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing a presentation on research and resources and things like that coming up, and Retro Reveal will be in there, of course, and a lot of other ones. And I have them on. It's called Bubble Up. I can't even tell you, probably 100 and some gigabytes of resources on this site. If you'd like to be invited, please let me know. I put my email in the chat. If you click on the little chat thing there, and if you want to be invited to future presentations, please let me know. I know most of you have been here and are on my list, but you'll get some fascinating stuff, and we always record it and share it afterwards, so you don't have to worry about it being here and missing it. You're still going to be able to see everything in its entirety, even if you have to be late or whatever. We'll have everything there.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
Charlie, terrific job. Thank you.
Oh, please, Ed. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Wayne.
Labor, and I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
You commented on it being $1.80 rate. I don't understand that. Could you explain that to me?
Well, the rate's the same going both ways.
Why? Came back a different system.
No, it came back on the same rate. It's a British. It was carried. It came back on a 90-cent rate, and the 42 is double 21, which is the debit the U.S. gets, or the money that's credited to the U.S. for having it on the American packet. The rate's the same. The 42 doesn't mean the rate. That means the amount of
I
money the US
understand
gets.
that, but I don't remember the 90-cent rate coming back.
It
With the
was.
with
It didn't
American-
say it, but
Yeah,
it was understood by the British. And it gets convoluted. And so, but basically, trust me, it's 90 cents
okay.
both ways.
You know,
the
and you're
42
right. Yeah, yeah.
The
I agree
42
with you,
is a
LeBron.
double 21, which is a credit to the US.
Yeah, and that's where I need to update this, and you're correct, because I think talking with Dwayne Endor, Dick, it was, Charlie, it wasn't just the 132, because it had to be 90-90, right, coming there and back. The other thing you have to add, though, too, and I have to add another 2 cents, is you had to pay the forwarding too to get from Arakan to Calcutta. So that also has to be added onto the 90-90, because that was also added, right?
Well, occasionally you'll find I had 2 covers. In fact, I had 4 covers from Burma
Yes.
that had to have a Indian stamp on it to get to the U.S. It paid it all the way to Calcutta, then it went from there, and they're very rare.
Oh, wow. Okay. This one, they didn't do that. This, they just,
But they did. You'd increase your value even more, Charlie.
Listen, no, I mean, easy. I'm just trying to get the block back with the dang thing. So let's, yeah. So yeah, you're right. Again, I'm taking notes. I will tweak and update this appropriately so that at least we've got that number in there. Absolutely. I was just happy to find out all this information. Amazing what you can find by doing a few searches. Wayne, you had a question though, please.
Yeah, did I miss something? Did you do extensive research to try to find out who originally owned this cover?
So that's funny. I did a little bit of research and I still cannot find out really.
How could you find? I mean, someone destroyed it.
Someone that's exactly, yeah. So LeBron's
Yeah, but
right.
I mean,
Someone
They
destroyed
wanted it
it.
was a stamp collector, evidently. They took the stamps off it,
Yeah, well,
and it came in, like you say, it came in a lot. So you probably a lot of cheap stampless covers or some
Came
good,
in
like
a
every
lot.
lot's good and bad.
came in a lot, and there was 3 or 4 really nice transatlantics, which had some really nice markings on it. One of them is, one was from a New York City ship mail that went to Greenock, which had a unique handstand. So there was a couple of nice ones. And then there was a couple like this that were kind of off to the side. And it was like, wow. So collector, dealer, I don't know. But, the fact that one, I can tell you, and I won't reveal, I know where it was and who ended up with it, right? And who was selling it. So
okay.
you don't know if who was selling it is the one that had it originally, took it off, or if they then received it and however they received it and they were just reselling it. So that I don't know, right? I don't know before that. All I know is where it ended up and how that, right? So, but I just don't. Yeah, I don't think we'll ever know that though, Wayne. I just don't think we will. Yeah. But you're right, LeBron. I mean, it's a shame because you had a pretty significant piece of postal history with a pretty significant, large, irregular block of 7 of number 17 on it that was removed, and disconnected from the piece of postal history. So, but listen, the good news is we told a story. We learned a few things about retro reveal. We learned a few things about this the missionary and the ship captain who took the baby back to the missionary even after the mother passed at sea. We learned a little bit about a few ships. We learned a little bit about rates. We learned that the New York clerk probably misstruck the wrong marking on it with the 7. That we've got to do a little digging on. So I again, like I said, I learned something every time I talk about this and talk about any covers that I try to diagnose. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you can do the same when you find a cover that has a few markings on it. Anything else? Did I miss it? Please, anybody else? This was great. I really appreciate your attention. You've been very patient.
Well, great presentation, Charles. So,
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I love covers like that because you run across them and you enjoy them. And I certainly enjoyed the presentation.
Well, I thank you very much. That means a lot coming from you and everybody here that participated. I thank you again. And Steve, thank you for hosting and for recording.
Of course.
And,
this is one of the joys of postal history. Most people get started in stamps, and there's only a limited amount of things you can research about stamps. But with these covers, you get a $5 or $10 cover, and it could tie you up for a couple of years. Who knows? And it could be you could hit the lottery with it. Who knows? Because it's something really neat. But
and our Lancaster crew missed a lot tonight too, but I'm sure they'll see it in the catch
They
Great
will.
class, Charlie. Great class.
I appreciate it. Well, listen, thank you, everybody. This was fantastic. I know, Steve, you'll be producing
Yeah.
it and getting it ready for prime time. So we just, again, I thank everybody for the opportunity to share this with you and
Yeah.
for all of you to
Thanks.
take an hour or two out of your time.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Good story.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
My
And
pleasure.
sometimes I cut out the comments at the end, but I'm going to leave them all in this time. Thank you, everyone, for all your input because I think it's very valuable. I'll leave it all together.
Thank you, Steve.
So,
Thank
have
you.
a great night, everybody, and thanks for being here. We'll
Thank you.
look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Let's see.